Happy Halloween! I picked a scary reading for you today. I'm going to be reading you the Eulogy of Simon. I'm reading from 1 Maccabees. You guys are probably missing Maccabees. Maccabees is a book nestled in between Esther and the book of Job. Okay, so Job's pretty early in the book. That's a pretty substantial piece that you're missing. It's 1 Maccabees and 2 Maccabees. This introduction says the first and second books of Maccabees were not in the Jewish canon. They were relegated to the Apocrypha. The church nevertheless gives recognition to them. There's much to be learned from them, including late developments in the Jewish belief before the Incarnation and about the position of the Jewish nation between the Greeks and Romans in the 2nd century BC. The background of both books is the fight, and it is a war story, and I read it to you on my playlist right now. You can hear it. It's a little over an hour. Spartans are involved. It's a wonderful story. It does end in the death of Simon, and I'm going to read you the eulogy about that. This is it's about the fight of the resistance movement against the Hellenization of the Jewish nation by the Seleucid kings, and that's spelled Seleucid, kings. Okay, Hellenization of the Jewish nation by these kings, and this is the story of the resistance. It's the first book of Maccabees that covers 40 years from 175 to 134 BC and must have been written before 63 BC, as a history of the times is invaluable, but allowances must be made for the author's intentions of writing a religious history modeled on the ancient chronicles of Israel. And the second book of Maccabees covers a part of the same period, written about the same date. It was written in Greek and a formal didactic style, incorporating documents which may be genuine. The book was addressed to the expatriate Jews. Expatriate. Expatriate. The expatriate Jews of Alexander. And it was written to rouse their concern for the dangers that are threatening the temple of Jerusalem, and it selects and arranges historical incidences for this purpose. This book provides setting during which the time of the book of Daniel was written. Now, Simon's tragic death at D-O-K, that's the final chapter of 1 Maccabees. So I am not going to read you all of it because obviously I already have. It's about an hour. I'm just going to read you the little blurbs about the top here. It starts with Alexander of Macedonia. He was the son of Philip, came from the land of Kittim, which the footnote says Cyprus. Anyway, he defeated the other king, Darius, King Darius, the king of the Persians and the Medes, and he succeeded as the ruler of Hellas, Hellas. He undertook campaigns, gained possession of the fortresses, he put the local kings to death. He advanced to the ends of the earth, plundering nation after nation. The earth was silent before him. His heart was swelled with pride. He assembled powerful forces. He subdued provinces, nations, and princes. They became his tributaries. I guess slaves. He enslaved them all, whatever. Alexander, he got sick. He was dying. He summoned his comrades, his noblemen, and his buddies brought up with him from his youth, and he divided up his kingdom while he was still alive. Alexander himself reigned 12 years, and he died, and each of his comrades established himself in his own region. They all assumed crowns, their heirs after them for many years, and they brought increasing evils on the world. And then we have, from these grew a sinful offshoot called Antiochus Epiphanes. He was the son of a king, Antiochus, once a hostage in Rome. He became king in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. And it was there that they emerged from Israel a set of renegades who led the people astray. They said, let's go reach an understanding with these pagans around us. Because ever since, we separated ourselves from them, all these misfortunes have overtaken. Anyway, they reached an agreement and gymnasiums were built. And we see the Roman Colosseums, still out there today. But the next one down is Antiochus Epiphanes. He despoils the temple. He persecutes the Jews that were remaining faithful to the law. Chapter 2 talks about Matthias unleashing a holy war. Matthias was the son of John, the son of Simeon, and he was a priest in the line of Joab. He left Jerusalem. He had 5 sons. Simon was one of them. John known as Gaddi. How about that? He had 5 sons. John known as Gaddi, Gaddi. Simon called Thascius, Judas called Maccabeus, Eleazar called Avron, and Jonathan called Appius. He saw these blasphemies that were being committed in Judah and Jerusalem. He said, I have been born to witness the overthrow of these people, the overthrow of the holy city. So, the whole book is a wonderful, wonderful story. The next thing down is there's an ordeal of the sacrifice at Modin, and an ordeal in the Sabbath in the desert. And then we have Matthias and his associates, and Matthias died in there. We have the testament and the death of Matthias. It's Halloween reading, might as well read that. As the days of Matthias were drawing close, he said to his sons, arrogance and outrage are now innocent. It's a period of turmoil and bitter hatred. Now is the time, children, for you have a burning fever for the law. Give your lives for the covenant of our ancestors. Remember the deeds performed by our ancestors, each in his generation, and you shall win great honor and everlasting renown. Was not Abraham tried and found faithful? Was that not counted as making him just? Joseph, in the time of his distress, maintained the law, and so became the Lord of Egypt. Phinehas, our father, in return for his burning fever, received a covenant of everlasting priesthood. Joshua, for carrying out his task, became the judge of Israel. Caleb, for his testimony before the assembled people, received an inheritance in the land. David, for his generous heart, inherited the throne of an everlasting kingdom. Elijah, for his consuming fervor for the law, caught up to heaven itself. Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael, for their fidelity, were saved from the flame. Daniel, for his singleness of heart, was rescued from the lion's jaw. Consider then how generation after generation all those who hope in him will not be found to falter. Do not fear the threats of the sinners. All the brave must come to the dunghill, and the worms exalted today and tomorrow. Nowhere is he to be found. He has returned to the dust he came, and his scheming is brought to nothing. My children, play the man, not the fraud, the man, and be courageous for the law. It's going to bring you glory. Here's your brother Simon. He's a man of sound judgment. Listen to him all of your lives. Let him take your father's place. Judas Maccabeus, strong and brave men from his youth, let them be your general and conduct the war against these pagans. The rest of you are to enroll in your ranks all those who keep the law and the exact vengeance of your people. Pay back these pagans in full. Hold fast to the ordinance of law. He blessed them and was laid to rest. He died in the year 146, buried in the ancestral tomb at Modin. All Israel mourned him. Then we have, then his son Judas was called Maccabeus, took over the command, and all his brothers who had attached themselves to his father now supported him, and they fought for Israel with a will. There was the first success of Judas, the preparations for the expeditions in Persia, legacy of Lysias. Then we have Gorgias and Nicanor. They led the Syrian army into Judea. The Jews muster at Mizpah, the battle of Emmaus, first campaign of Lysias, and the purification of the temple, its dedication, the expedition against the Idumeans and the Ammonites, and the opening campaigns in Galilee and Gilead. The expedition in Galilee and Gilead, and a setback at Jamnia, successes in Idumea and Philistia, the last days of Antioch Epiphanes, that's chapter 6. Then there is the accession of Antiochus V, the siege of the citadel of Jerusalem by Judas Maccabeus, and the expedition of Antioch V, the battle of Beth Zechariah. We have the capture of Beth Zor and the siege of Mount Zion by the Syrians. The king grants the Jews their own religious freedom. That's the end of chapter 6. Chapter 7 starts Demetrius I becomes king. He sends Bacchides and alchemists to Judea. Nicanor was in Judea, and that's the battle of Caphar Salama, threats against the temple, and the day of Nicanor. Nicanor, I think he was a guy that kept raising up his hand, and they ended up cutting off his hand, I think, that he stretched out so arrogantly in this book. Anyway, the eulogy, another eulogy in number 8, eulogy of the Romans, and there was an alliance between the Jews and the Romans. Chapter 9 is the battle of Beer-Zeth and the death of Judas Maccabeus, and the funeral of Judas Maccabeus is chapter 9. And then Jonathan became the leader of the Jews and the high priest. This is the years 160 to 142, BC. The triumph of the Greek party. Jonathan leads a resistance. Jonathan was in the desert of Tekoa. There was a bloody encounter in Medeba, crossing the Jordan. Bacchides builds fortifications. Another death of alchemists. The siege of Bathbasi. Alexander Bolus competes for Jonathan's support, appoints him as a high priest. There was a beautiful letter from Demetrius to Jonathan, and then Jonathan rejects Demetrius' offer. There was a marriage. Cleopatra's in this book. Alexander's marriage with Cleopatra. Jonathan as a military commissioner and the governor general. Then we have Darius II. Apollonius, the governor of Kol, Syria, was defeated by Jonathan. Then we have Ptolemy. Ptolemy the Sixth supports Demetrius II, but he dies at the same time as Alexander Balas. Early relations between Demetrius and Jonathan, a new charter favoring the Jews. King Demetrius to Jonathan his brother and to the Jewish greetings. That's chapter 1 Maccabees 11. And then we have Demetrius II rescued by Jonathan's troops at Antioch. Jonathan opposes Demetrius II, and Simon retakes Beth Zur. There was a Hazor affair. Jonathan's relations with the Spartans is chapter 12. Jonathan in Kol, Syria, and Simon in Philistia, working in Jerusalem. Jonathan falls into the hands of his enemies, and Simon takes command. That's chapter 13. Simon was a high priest and ethnarch. He was ethnarch of the Jews. Simon takes command after he heard Trypho had collected a large army to invade and devastate the land. Simon repels Trypho from Judea. Jonathan is buried in the mausoleum that was built by Simon at Modin. There was favors of Demetrius II to Simon. Then capture of Gezer by Simon. It says Simon went to lay siege at Gezer, surrounded it with his troops, constructed a mobile tower, brought it up to the city, opened a breach in one of its bastions, and took it. The men in the mobile tower sprang out of the city. When the great confusion ensued, citizens accompanied their wives and children, mounted their ramparts with their garments torn out loudly, and implored Simon to make peace with them. Treat us, they said, not as our wickedness deserves, but as your mercy prompts you. And Simon came to terms with them. stopped fighting. He expelled them from the city, purified the houses which contained the idols, and he made an entry with songs of praise. He banished all uncleanness from it and settled men in it who observed the law, and having fortified it and built a residence for himself there, the men in the citadel in Jerusalem, prevented as they were from going into the country to buy and sell, were desperate for lack of food, and numbers of them were carried off by starvation. They begged Simon to make peace. He granted this. Though he expelled them, he purified the citadel from its pollutions. The Jews made an entry on the 23rd day of the second month in the year 171, and acclamations carrying palms, sounds of harps, cymbals, zithers, chantings, hymns, canticles, since the great enemy was crushed and thrown out. Thrown out of Israel. Simon made it a day of rejoicing. I usually read this during Hanukkah. I'm throwing it in Halloween because of this eulogy coming up. Anyway, he strengthened the fortifications of the temple of the hill by the citadel, took up the residence with his men. Seeing that his son John came to manhood, Simon appointed him as the commander of the forces. And in the year of 172, King Demetrius assembled his forces, marched to Medina to fight Trypho. When the Arsaces, the king of Persia and Media, heard that Demetrius had entered this territory, he sent one of the generals to capture him alive. The general went and defeated the army of Demetrius and seized him, and they brought him through Arsaces and put him into prison. And the country was at peace all the days of Simon. And then there was a renewal of the alliance with Sparta and Rome, and the officials' honors were decreed for Simon. Antioch recognizes Simon's title. They besiege Trypho in Dor. Ambassadors returned from Rome to Judea, and the alliance with Rome was proclaimed. Antioch was besieging Dor and became hostile to Simon and sends him a reprimand. Sendibos was the governor of Litter War. He harassed Judea, and then there was a victory of Simon's sons. Jonathan's went up to Gezer, reported what his father Simon was doing, and Simon summoned the 2 elder sons of Judah and said to him, I and my brothers and my father's house has fought these enemies of Israel since our youth until today. And the enterprise we directed has been successful. Many a times we have brought Israel deliverance, but now I'm old, and while you are mercifully and old enough, take my place and my brothers and go fight for our nation. May the support of heaven be with you. Then he selected from the country 20,000 fighting men's cavalry, marched against Sendibos in the city, spending the night in Modena. Making an early start, they marched into the plain to find a large army that was opposing them, infantry and cavalry. There was a wadi between them, and John drew up the face, he and his people, seeing that the men were afraid to cross the wadi. He crossed first himself, and when the men saw this, they too crossed, and he divided his armies on foot. The entire horse regime, the enemy's cavalry was numerous, the trumpets rang out, Sendibos was routed, and his army, many fell mortally wounded, and the remainder took refuge in fortress. It was then that Judas's brother was wounded, and John pursued them until Sendibos reached Kidron. The fight took them as far as the towers in the countryside, and the enemies amounted to 10,000 men. And Ptolemy, the son of Abubas, had been appointed the military commissioner for the plain of Jericho. He owned much silver and gold, and he was the high priest's son-in-law. The ambition was fired, and he hoped to make himself master of the whole country. He began to plot the ruin of Simon and his sons. Simon, who was inspecting the towns up and down the country, attending to their administration, had come down to Jericho, and his sons Matthias and Judas in the year 177, in the 11th month, in the month of Shabbat, the sons of Abubas, lured them into a small fortress called Dok, D-O-K, which he had built, and he offered a great banquet. having men concealed in there, though. Simon and his sons went in. They got drunk. Ptolemy leapt to his feet, and grasping the weapons, they rushed on Simon right in that banqueting hall and killed him right there with his 2 sons and some of the servants. So he committed a great act of treachery. He rendered evil for good. And Ptolemy wrote of this affair and sent it to the king, and their expectation of being reinforced and having cities and the province made over to him, he sent other men to Gezer to murder John, and sent written orders to the military commanders to come so that they could present them with silver and gold and gifts. He sent others to take possession of Jerusalem and Temple Hill. Some had been too quick for him and had already informed John in Gezer and that his father and his brothers were dead, adding that he's also sending people to kill you. Overcome as he was by the news, John arrested the men who had come to kill him and put him to death, since he already knew their murderous design. And the rest of John's acts, battles, and thoughts and exploits were performed on the city walls that he built, and all the other achievements are to be found recorded in the annals of the pontificate from the day he succeeded his father as high priest.